Nullification season starts now. Right now. And living under the largest government in history, we've got a ton of nullifying to do. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of the all-new Nullification Movement News, NMN. NMN. I'll get it eventually. Every Friday here on the Path to Liberty podcast, we'll be covering the most interesting and important news reports from, you got it, the Nullification Movement. And we'll do that over the next few months during what we like to call Nullification season. So let's get right to it with Nullification News Report number 1. So what the heck is this whole Nullification season thing anyway? And I know this technically isn't a news report, but it's important, so hear me out. Nullification season is our term of endearment for when most state legislatures are in session, and thus most nullification legislation is introduced and considered. And if we do a really good job of it, we might even see a few pass too. The bulk of these states are in session from early January through late March or mid-April or so. Once it all winds down, we'll get back to our regular Path to Liberty Fast Friday edition of the show. And that brings me to Nullification News Report number 2. The Defend the Guard Act is quickly becoming one of the most popular in the broader liberty movement, and it's also one of the most difficult to get passed, too. The Defend the Guard Act would prohibit the deployment of state guard troops in active duty combat unless Congress has passed a declaration of war, as required by the Constitution, or taken another official action pursuant to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 of the Constitution to explicitly call forth the Guard for one of 3 enumerated purposes: execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, or repel invasions. Defend the Guard has already been introduced in a handful of states. In Missouri, it's House Bill 166. In Texas, it's House Bill 184. In Oklahoma, it's Senate Bill 29. And in New Hampshire, I'm not sure, but I think it's going to be House Bill 325. Expect to see Defend the Guard introduced in at least a dozen other states in the coming weeks. Of course, the military-industrial complex isn't too happy about this, and I know you won't be surprised to learn why. It's because it works. And the Kentucky Guard Public Affairs Office pretty much confirmed that on Twitter, reminding us that 45% of the Army's divisional combat power is in the Guard. This was supposed to be a reason to not pass the legislation. But maybe they're missing the fact that that's the whole point, right? As states consider the Defend the Guard Act, you can expect them to be threatened with a loss of federal funding. And the Kentucky Guard also hinted at this, suggesting that passage of the act would result in them losing combat assets and personnel. And in a very scary-sounding letter from the North Dakota Adjutant General's office, they say pretty much the same. Efforts to pass Defend the Guard in West Virginia in recent years gave us the BRAC threat. Pass the legislation, and you'll end up on the base, realignment, and closure list. But you know, you don't catch flack unless you're over the target. And here at TAC, we've been right over the target for over 15 years. We're sticking our finger right in the eye of the empire, and they hate us for it. Nothing helps us get that kind of work done every single day more than the financial faith and support of our members. Over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members, you can join us for as little as $2 a month. We also have annual, 5-year, and lifetime membership options, and you can help us take a stand for the Constitution and liberty, whether the government happens to like it or not. So a big thanks goes out to you through the TAC membership program for sponsoring this episode of Nullification Movement News. Hey, welcome back to the show. And so last up for today is Nullification News Report number 3. It should be pretty obvious by now that Joe and his predecessors, Don and Barry and George, and even going back to people like Franklin and Woodrow, and pretty much everyone else, they've all been trashing the economy for generations with their Federal Reserve and their fiat funny money. Thomas Jefferson told us that paper is poverty. It's only the ghost of money and not money itself. And if what we have today isn't bad enough already, they definitely want to make things worse with a CBDC. That's why it's so important to get on board with real money, sound money, gold and silver, like in the Constitution. In Missouri, Senate Bill 100 from Bill Eigel would take big steps towards that goal by first of all making gold and silver legal tender in the state like it always should have been, by eliminating capital gains taxes on gold and silver, and by establishing a bullion depository. Kind of like a precious metal bank, but outside the Federal Reserve System. The first state to do anything like this was Utah back in 2011, and these days you can even get the Utah gold back, which they call the first local voluntary currency to be made of a spendable, beautiful, physical gold. As the Fed and the feds keep devaluing the purchasing power of the dollar, bills like Missouri SB 100 won't just be a hypothetical good idea. They will be essential to build a foundation for the people to keep their liberty.